If you've brought too much with you tonight, too many memories, too many unfinished thoughts, then rest here. This space was made for quiet arrivals. No declarations, no demands, only hush. Let the weight of your shoulders settle into this place where the air still smells faintly of smoke and damp wool. If this suits your silence, leave a dot below. Now, let the lights dim. Let the past begin. They don't call it sleep, not really. Not in a time when fire is more essential than breath. And just as jealous, you lie near the hearth because it demands to be fed, and so, in exchange, you are granted heat, but never peace. Peace is for the dead, and even they aren't always still. The floor is uneven beneath your straw mat. It pokes and shifts, as though something beneath the rushes stirs when you do. You try not to think about it. The night is long, and the thoughts you let in will keep company far longer than you intended. You are not alone, and you never have been. There is a body beside you, curled like a comma, maybe your cousin, maybe your uncle. You've shared warmth so long you can feel his dreams in the way his feet twitch. Across from you, two others take turns rolling toward the hearth, then away from it, like tides. One murmurs in sleep, the other hums, faint and tuneless. It's not a lullaby. It's the sound of a woman who's been told all her life that quiet is survival, but who still cannot help filling the dark with something of herself. You don't sleep in hours. You sleep in shifts, one eye closed, the other watching the coals, one breath soft, the other catching. Someone must always wake to prod the fire, to scatter the ash, to whisper to the smoke like it understands. Because if the fire dies, so might someone else, a child, an elder. You, sleep habits, here, are not habits at all. They're improvisations, strategies, rituals carved out of exhaustion and necessity. And no one teaches you how. You learn by lying still and hoping your shiver doesn't wake the baby near your feet. You learn by waking up with your fingers curled into someone else's sleeve and not pulling away. You learn by listening, not for silence, because silence doesn't exist here, but for the shift in rhythm that means someone is too still or no longer warm. There is always sound. The pop of a log split open by heat, the soft hiss of wet wool steaming on the hearth rail, the click of teeth in restless jaws. Outside, the wind presses itself against the wooden walls like it's searching for the seams between lives. Sometimes it finds one. The town sleeps like a creature with 100 eyes half closed. Dogs stir. Roosters cough in their throats like they've forgotten the time. Bells, faint ones, chime from the chapel tower, though no one quite remembers why they're rung at such an hour. Habit, maybe, or fear of forgetting. Even in dreams, the bell reminds the town it is being watched, or maybe simply not alone. You used to think sleep was simple, a descent, a drift. But here, it is interruption. It is permission revoked at a moment's notice. You sleep bent, clothed, half awake. You do not dream of flying. You dream of missing the ember and waking to frost on your hands. You dream of smoke that won't rise. You dream of voices outside the door that say nothing and knock not once. And still, you lie down again. Because you must. Because morning is not a rescue. It is another set of duties, and only sleep can dull the edge of what's to come. So you gather your limbs, arrange your body into a shape that welcomes neither comfort nor deep sleep, and surrender. If the child beside you coughs, you lift your hand before your eyes open. If the logs pop, you twitch, trained to expect collapse. If the coals dim, you sit up, not because you're rested, but because sitting is faster than dying. Some sleep sitting up already, not from superstition, but from practice. The stools near the wall are claimed first by the oldest, the most afraid to lie flat and not wake. One man mutters Latin in his sleep, though he cannot read. Another clasps a small wooden cross to his chest. Even in slumber, the rope at his waist is frayed from how tightly he ties it. He says it's to remind him of his vows. Others suspect it's to remind him he is still here. Historians still wonder if this kind of fragmented, cautious sleeping was universal, or if it was shaped by geography, class, and climate. But the fires never lied. They burned everywhere, and they were rarely left alone. Even the nobility kept servants up through the night to tend their hearths, which is to say, to keep them alive. You learned, once, of something called first sleep and second sleep, a practice that sounds gentle, almost luxurious, in books. But for you, it's just the name for the waking that always comes around moonrise, when the fire must be stirred, the chamber pot emptied, the sick checked for breath. It is a moment to pray, or to grieve, or to visit your neighbor quietly in the straw. No one speaks of these visits by day. No one has to. They are not scandal. They are warmth. The fire, again, demands. Someone stirs. You pretend to be asleep. You pretend not to know it's your turn. But the guilt wakes you more than the nudge does. You rise, quietly, always quietly. Your knees crack, but your footsteps don't. The embers glow like a beast half-fed. You kneel, you blow, you murmur. Not words, just breath shaped like apology. The flames respond, faintly. They remember you. They forgive. Behind you, the room is shifting. One sleeper turns over. Another sits upright, blinking into the smoke. You do not speak. No one does. The sound of your breath on the coals is enough. And if you've already forgotten how we got here, that's perfectly all right. History does it all the time. In this moment, you are not a peasant or a scholar or a soul from a distant century. You are simply someone keeping the fire alive. And the fire remembers. It always remembers. There are no true shadows here, only diluted light. Even now, as you lie still with your face turned toward the wooden wall, your eyes catch the flicker of a flame not yet gone out. You are not sure whether it comes from the hearth across the room or from the thin gap beneath the threshold where someone has hung a lantern outside, maybe to frighten off ghosts, maybe to invite them in. It was never really dark in a medieval room, not the way darkness is described now, with poetic finality and velvet silence. No, this kind of darkness always moved. It shimmered faintly. It carried the breath of other sleepers in its folds. It danced across beams where moonlight leaked through thatch. It glinted off brass buckles, off puddles of old wax, off the white of someone's eye still open in restless half-dream. You know this room by sound before you know it by name. Before sleep comes, you listen. You always listen. There's the flap of a cloth curtain where someone tied it wrong, the low thrum of someone's snore caught between lung and throat, the clatter of a mouse, or maybe a child, tumbling across a pile of wooden bowls, and that faint, patient scraping a woman across the floor, preparing another dose of herbs for someone whose cough won't end. The sleep habits here, if they can even be called that, do not follow pattern or logic. They follow obligation. They follow breath. They follow the fears no one names in daylight. There's a rhythm in the room, but it is not musical. It's more like the tide of worry moving from one person to the next. The room is small, but the worry fills it to the ceiling and then folds back in, dripping slowly into dreams. The window is not for beauty, nor for air. It is a square hole plugged with horn or oilskin, scraped thin to let in what little outside dares enter. No glass, not here. And even if there were, it would be smeared with soot and frost. What light gets through bends like it's been warned not to look too closely. You see your reflection in it, sometimes warped and floating, and wonder whether that's you now, or the version of yourself who never fell asleep the night before last. Light means different things here. A candle is not romance. It is rationed time. It is work undone. A tallow stub burning low on the mantel tells the room there's someone still stitching in the corner, still reading from memory, still praying with eyes half shut because there are no pages, only voice. When the candle gutters, it's not just a signal of sleep. It's a small death, a loss of boundary between here and not here, and still the room never empties of light completely. There is always a glow, sometimes from the fire, sometimes from the moon, sometimes from the eyes of the cat on the rafters, blinking slowly, like it knows how many hours are left until dawn and disapproves of your guess. Even your dreams are lit, faintly, as if someone opened the door just a crack and held a taper out into the hallway. You dream of blue flame on wet wood, of a procession through a town square lit only by torches, of a saint's face glowing in the stained glass of a chapel you've never entered, but somehow remember. No one speaks of nightmares here. They're not considered dreams at all, just warnings in a different tongue. One woman once described waking up to find a small boy at the foot of her bed, silent, dripping, with straw caught in his sleeves. No one laughed. No one dismissed her. Someone poured wine into her hands and made the sign of the cross on her forehead. After that, they placed rosemary near the windows and burned an old shoe in the hearth, just in case. Darkness was not empty. It was not trusted. It was where promises whispered back, but only in riddles. You slept near the center of the room if you were loved, near the wall if you had sinned, or simply if you were new. There is a kind of hierarchy to sleeping space. The mother lies closest to the fire, the baby tucked beneath one arm. The elder uncle sleeps propped upright against the wall, snoring like a collapsed barn. The hired boy curls under the bench, the dog against his ribs. It is unspoken, but known light belongs to those who labor most or those who are most likely to vanish by morning. Outside the house, the town slumbers too, but not fully. Lamps sway faintly in alleyways. Someone walks home too slowly. Another tends the pigs by moonlight. The bell at the church strikes again, though no one counts. The hour is less important than the echo it leaves in your chest. Some say it keeps the dead in their place. Others say it keeps the living aware of who hasn't returned. You lie still, eyes half open. The room, with all its strange flickers and moving shapes, has become familiar. You know which creak in the floorboard belongs to whom, which blanket rustle means what. You even know the sigh of the wind under the eaves, the long exhale of a house too old to hold its breath. A man once told you that darkness wasn't the absence of light, but the presence of waiting. He'd been a monk once, or so he claimed, and said the best time for prayer was when no one else could see your face. That way, only the divine could tell if your expression meant it. Historians still debate whether medieval people were afraid of the dark or simply knew it better than we do now. Some say darkness was communal then, not lonely. Others claim it was feared in silence, beneath whispers of witches, wolves, and watchers who never needed to knock. There's truth in both, and the room, somehow, makes space for both. Even now, centuries later, you feel the imprint of those long nights not as memory, but as atmosphere, a residue in the shape of breath. You wonder, for a moment, if some part of you remembers how to fear the light, how to flinch when a candle flickers in the wrong direction, how to sit upright the moment the fire dims, how to listen when a shadow bends wrong. Your sleep never truly deepens. It stretches, then recoils. You turn onto your side. The wall beside you is warmer now, maybe because someone passed by recently, or because your thoughts have begun to radiate back. There's a whisper in the room, not a voice, just a rhythm. The house settling, or breathing, or waiting. And you wonder, not for the first time, whether the room itself remembers everyone who ever slept here, if its beams keep stories trapped inside the grain, if its walls hear your dreams and measure them against those that came before. The moonlight thickens. The fire mutters. Someone coughs. And still, no one speaks. The room, with all its not darkness, becomes softer, not quieter. And you, for the first time in hours, begin to sink into sleep not because it has taken you, but because it has allowed you. And if this feels like a story you've only half heard before, maybe that's enough. You exhale. The light shifts again. The room holds. There is a difference between sleeping and surrendering. And here, in this narrow room with walls made of mud, lath, and breath, you do not sleep alone, not because you are loved, nor because you are safe, but because the cold is unforgiving, and bodies, whether kin or stranger, radiate warmth better than any hearth. The bed is not really a bed. It is a frame, barely raised from the ground, supported by slats of wood uneven from years of bending and weight. The straw mattress has long ceased being straw. It has become memory of sweat, of spilled broth, of birth, of fever, of nights that stretched so long that even the mice stopped moving. You lie on it sideways, curled inward, your knees against your chest, because that is the shape that takes up the least room and makes the least noise. You are not the first to lie here tonight. Someone else has already marked their place, left behind a faint indentation and a warmer patch of cloth that quickly fades. You slide in silently, as if the mattress will protest, and in some ways, it does. It groans, faintly, a sound not unlike breath, not unlike complaint, not unlike surrender. There are at least 3 other bodies here, maybe 4, one against your back, a cousin, perhaps, or the daughter of your father's apprentice, another across your shins, already snoring through her nose like someone who's earned the right to sleep through interruptions. At the far edge, near the wall, a figure you can't see, but feel their exhale is steady, their presence faintly sour with the smell of boiled turnip and wet wool. In this room, privacy is not a concept, and shame is a luxury no one can afford. You have heard someone give birth 2 arms away and say nothing. You have watched a man die at the foot of this same bed without moving your hand from under the blanket. There are too many bodies for ceremony, too little space for anything but endurance. The sleep habits here are dictated not by preference but by necessity. No one asks how you like to rest. No one offers options. The question is not, did you sleep well, but did you sleep at all? And if the answer is yes, it is a victory. If not, you rise anyway. Some say that people used to sleep better back then, that their sleep was more natural, more in tune with the rising and setting of the sun. But here, you see only exhaustion interrupted by chores, dreams twisted by aches, and the kind of dozing that comes from being too tired to keep your eyes open, but too aware of elbows, knees, and whispers to truly let go. A child stirs, not yours, but close enough. You feel their heel press into your thigh as they turn, muttering something you don't catch. The bed shifts beneath you all, like a raft struggling to keep balance on uncertain water. No one complains. No one ever does. Complaints are for those with spare rooms. You think, sometimes, of beds you've seen in the houses of wealthier townsfolk large, wide things raised so high off the ground that steps are needed to reach them, draped in linen, surrounded by carved posts. You wonder what it feels like to stretch your limbs in all directions and touch nothing but emptiness. But then again, perhaps emptiness is cold. Perhaps solitude has its own weight, heavier even than another person's shoulder pressed to your ribs. You lie still, not from comfort, but from strategy. Any movement that invites retaliation, a kick, a groan, a rearrangement that will inevitably displace the fragile equilibrium you've all managed to construct. The woman beside you has her arm tucked beneath your neck, not out of affection, but because it is the only place left for it to go. The man across from you has his feet wedged between your ankles. You let him. Tomorrow you'll swap places and forget who was touching whom, because none of it is remembered, and all of it is remembered. It is difficult to fall asleep when you can feel someone else's breath on your eyelids. Even more difficult when that breath smells of cabbage. But eventually, the repetition dulls the protest. The rhythm of shared breath becomes a kind of lullaby, uneven, yes, but predictable. And in a world this uncertain, predictability is a mercy. There is no turning in your sleep here, only permission to sag, to melt slightly downward into the soft sink of straw and cloth, to accept the closeness of others as not only inevitable but necessary. You feel their ribs expand and collapse. You feel their dreams twitch through limbs. You feel their hunger pressing out from the pit of their stomach, echoed by your own. A dog lies at the foot of the bed. You think it's yours, though it might be your neighbor's. It doesn't matter. It stays, loyal not to a person, but to the fire. It grumbles once in its throat and goes quiet. You don't reach for it, but you find comfort in the slow rise and fall of its side. The dog, at least, is warm without shame. Historians often mention that beds were shared in the medieval period not just by couples, but by siblings, guests, apprentices, even strangers. It sounds quaint until you realize what it means. It means cold walls. It means floors that bite. It means sleep that must be protected like a secret. It means your body becomes part of the architecture of others' rest. You have learned to identify people by the way they move in sleep. One cousin scratches his stomach every hour on the hour. The neighbor girl groans once before settling into a rigid stillness that lasts until dawn. The woman with the twisted toe always kicks, once, just before letting go, and you exhale through your nose 3 times before silence claims you. It is a routine, a ritual, a roll call without speech. And if the bed feels like a creature sometimes pulsing, shifting, alive in ways furniture shouldn't be, you do not question it. It has held too many hearts to be considered inanimate. There is a rope above you, strung from beam to beam, where clothes and herbs hang drying. One of the shirts dips too low and brushes your cheek. You resist the urge to swat it away. To do so would risk waking others. So you lie there, eyes closed, cheek against damp wool, and pretend it is intentional. Someone murmurs a prayer. Another replies in their sleep. The words tangle in the rafters and do not return. You are grateful. Not all prayers should be heard twice. Outside, the town creaks. A door slams against its frame in the wind. A rooster cries out far too early. The fire coughs, unattended for now. You hear footsteps, or perhaps it's just your heart. Either way, no one moves. The room, the bed, the bodies they hold. For now. And if you've been wondering whether comfort is the same as closeness, you're not the only one. Sleep comes eventually, not as rest, but as permission to pause. You do not dream, or perhaps you do, but the dream is simply this: the continued warmth of others, the absence of interruption, the steady, quiet heartbeat of a room not meant to be alone. You drift, not away, but inward, folded into a bed that is not yours, held by bodies that will forget your name, blanketed by silence that remembers everything. It begins with your back against the wall, a spine taught not by posture, but by precaution. There is no pillow, only a folded tunic or a bundle of straw bound in sackcloth. And even that you use with hesitation. Your knees are drawn up, not from cold alone, but from a deeper instinct. One so old, it might have come from stories your mother never meant to pass on. You sleep sitting up not because it is restful, but because it is watchful, because too many have lain down and failed to rise again. They told you, once, in the kind of tone people use when they've stopped believing but not forgotten, that to sleep flat was to invite spirits to think you ready for burial, that the dead lie on their backs with their hands folded and their mouths closed by those left behind. And so, perhaps, sitting up is a way of saying not yet, not tonight, but it's more than that. Your days are filled with tasks that bend the body, kneading, lifting, digging, carrying. Your muscles have learned how to hold you upright even in rest, as if defiance were a habit as old as hunger. To lean too far into the mattress is to give yourself to its pull. To sit up is to remember your shape, to keep one part of yourself above the dream. There are those who sleep this way not because of belief, but because of design. The room is too full, the floor too wet, the air too cold near the ground. So you choose the stool beside the fire, the bench near the door, the barrel turned on its side and padded with a blanket borrowed from your cousin. You wrap your arms around your legs and tuck your chin to your chest. And though it is not rest, it is something like quiet, something like not being dead. Monks, too, have their habits, both cloth and ritual. You once heard of an order who sat upright in carved stalls, their heads nodding forward in prayer and in sleep alike, their dreams intermingling with Latin half-remembered and bells tolling in their skulls. They said upright sleep was purer, less indulgent, less vulnerable to the sins that creep in through dreams. You do not know if you believe them, but you believe in the cold, and the cold punishes those who sleep too still. In the towns, the poor do not own beds. They sleep in chairs, on steps, against walls still warm from the sun. A baker's apprentice curls into the curve of a kneading trough. A washerwoman leans against a vat, her feet still damp, her arms folded under her head as if she is both burden and pillow. These are not choices. These are concessions. You, at least, are indoors. You, at least, have firelight and breath not clouded by frost. But still, your body leans forward. Your back aches before the dreams even arrive. And you tell yourself it is temporary, that when the children grow, when the crops return, when the debt is paid, you will lie down again like someone who trusts the world not to take them in their sleep. The bell rings again, faint, distant, as if underwater. It's a church bell, you think? Or perhaps the bell hung around a cow's neck, wandering too close to the edge of the village in the dark. Bells are everywhere here. Some mark time, some mark warning. Some are hung outside houses where fever has taken hold, as if the sound itself might keep others away, or remind the sickness that it is being watched. You shift slightly. The stool beneath you creaks. No one else stirs. A log splits in the hearth. The sound reminds you of bone. You sleep sitting up because you've seen what happens to those who don't. Old Raffin, who lay down after supper and never woke his eyes open, as if he'd simply paused mid-thought. The widow, Elistraine, who claimed she saw her dead husband in a dream and followed him into the river the next morning. And the child, only 5, who went to sleep during Mass and whose mouth bled onto her collar as if a word had turned sharp and swallowed her instead. Historians still debate whether these stories are superstition, misdiagnosis, or metaphor. They write about sleep patterns as though they are arithmetic biphasic rhythms, waking intervals, social functions. But no parchment can fully capture what it means to press your back against the rough plaster of a shared room wall and try not to trust the quiet too much. Because the quiet isn't always kind. There is also the matter of vigilance. Someone must watch the coals. Someone must hear the cry that doesn't belong in the night. Someone must know the difference between wind against the door and fingers. And if you sleep sitting up, you are already halfway to waking. Your legs may cramp, but your ears remain open. Your dreams are thin, like veils, easy to push aside. Sometimes, in this half-sleep, you see things. Not visions, not truly but impressions. The shape of your father's boots by the hearth, though he's been buried 2 winters now. The smell of soap berries, though it is not their season. A voice murmuring your name in the accent of someone you loved once and left. These are not hauntings. They are memories stirred by posture, by proximity, by the way exhaustion opens doors that wakefulness keeps closed. You learn to navigate them, to nod without answering, to blink and let the image pass, to murmur back not in fear, but in acknowledgement. Not everything that visits you in this posture means you harm. Some just want to be remembered. Eventually, your head drops. Your chin rests on your chest. The fire has dimmed, but its red pulse still reflects in the sheen of your eyes. You are still sitting, but you are somewhere else. You are a figure in a chapel stall, a merchant on a cart, a girl curled under a staircase, holding a cat to her stomach and pretending the purring's a lullaby. You are hundreds of years old, or you are 10, and still your sleep is vertical, untrusting, abbreviated. And if your limbs ache when you rise, and they always do, you carry that pain like a relic, because it means you are not among the ones who forgot to sit up. Outside, a bird calls out, surprised by its own voice. You lift your head, your neck protests. You are back. No one noticed you were gone, and if sleep habits like these seem strange to those who came later, to those with pillows that do not collapse and blankets that do not itch, then let them think so. Let them forget that sleep was once a thing earned through cold and vigilance, not comfort. Let them lie flat, arms at their sides, mouths open in perfect trust. You'll remain here a little longer, spine bent, eyes half shut, waiting for the bell to ring again and hoping it's not for you. It does not matter how far you are from the steeple. The sound finds you, always. You could be curled into your knees by the fire, half asleep with the scent of soot on your skin and a child's foot pressed beneath your thigh, or standing behind a wooden stall in the cold air of early morning. breath white and hands chafed, raw and still. It rings, not with volume, but with authority. The bell marks the hour, yes, but it also marks you, carving something into the marrow of your spine that tells you what time it is, even when your eyes are closed and your thoughts are floating between this world and the next. It is not the sound that wakes you. It's the rhythm, the memory of how it rang yesterday and the day before, and how it will ring tomorrow, whether you rise to hear it or not. It tolls from the chapel tower in the center of the village, metal on metal echoing across tiled roofs and straw thatch, slipping through shutters and under doors, bouncing off sleeping pigs and silent rafters, until it is no longer a sound in the air, but a presence in your body. You do not question its authority, because no one ever taught you to. The bell tells you when to kneel, when to swallow your bread, when to stop weaving, when to turn toward the altar, even if your soul is still wandering the fields. It divides your day into fragments, notched and clattered into place like pebbles in a wooden cup. Matins, lauds, prime, terce, sext, nones, vespers, compline. The names rise and fall like breathing, and somewhere between them, you sleep or try to. Even at night, when the fire has dimmed to the color of dried blood and the baby in the far corner has finally stopped whimpering, you know the bell will ring again. And though it's not meant for you, not exactly, not unless you are a monk or a priest or a widow, with one ear still tuned to the grave, it still echoes inside your skull. It becomes part of the sleep habits of this world, part of the sleep itself. Not a disruption, not quite. More a reminder that sleep, here, is not an escape. It is only a pause between obligations. You used to imagine the bell as a voice, a mouth in the sky calling out to the village like a shepherd to sheep. But now you know better. It is not a voice. It is a hand. And when it strikes, you feel it not just in your ears, but in your teeth, in the base of your skull, in the slowness of your pulse. Some part of your body is always waiting for the next ring, even when you believe you've forgotten, even when you believe you've grown used to the quiet, because there is no real silence, not here, not ever. And when the bell doesn't ring on feast days, or in storms, or when the ropes have frayed and snapped in the night, the absence is louder than the sound itself. People stir in their sleep. Children cry without reason. Someone mutters a prayer twice, forgetting they already said it. You once watched an old man wake screaming because he thought he had slept through it, though it had never rung at all. That is what it means to live beneath the bell. Its presence becomes the shape of your expectations, and when that shape fails, even briefly, your sense of time unravels. You sleep lightly, knowing that even in your dreams, you will hear it. A single note, or perhaps two, like a question half asked and then forgotten. Sometimes it becomes part of your dream itself, a bell ringing over a field, a bell tied to the collar of a dog you can never reach, a bell sounding just as you open a door that doesn't exist. When you wake, the sound lingers, not in the air, but in the bones behind your ears. You shake your head. It doesn't help. Historians still wonder whether the medieval mind heard time the way we do, as something linear, as something that can be measured and lost and made up again. But you know that time here is a loop, a rhythm, a circle walked in bare feet around the bell tower again and again until the track is worn so deep it becomes instinct. And instinct is what wakes you now. You sit up in the dark. The fire has sunk low, barely a breath left in its belly. No one else moves. You strain your ears, but the bell hasn't rung. Not yet. Still, you know it will. Soon, the moment is coming. Your body has already prepared for it, already braced. When it finally comes, 3 soft tolls, spaced wide apart, it does not surprise you. It does not startle. It confirms. It affirms. It says yes. The world continues. Yes, the others are still here. Yes, the fire may be fading, but the bell has not forgotten your name. You think of the man who climbs the tower every day, whose job it is to pull the rope that makes the sound. You've never seen his face clearly, only a glimpse of his back against the high window, hunched and slow-moving, like a creature who has lived in rhythm for too long to change. You imagine his hands wrapped in cloth, his fingers thick with callus, his arms shaped by repetition. What does he think about? You wonder. While the bell swings above him, does he count each chime like a prayer? Or has he grown deaf to his own work? Sometimes, you suspect there is no man at all, that the bell rings because it must, because it cannot not ring, because the world has folded itself so thoroughly around its sound that to stop would be to unravel the entire village. Perhaps the bell is ancient. Perhaps it predates the tower. Perhaps it rang even before names were spoken, before time was measured, before sleep required explanation. But then again, perhaps it is only metal and rope. Perhaps that is enough. You lie back down, still upright, still alert. The baby turns over and sighs. Someone near the door coughs once and settles again. The dog groans. The bell is finished, for now, and still it rings in your head. The bell is not the only one. Other bells exist, smaller, crueler. A bell worn around a goat's neck, so you know when it wanders too far. A bell hung on the rope of the leper's staff, announcing the arrival of someone who must not be touched. A bell placed outside a sick house, rung once every hour to remind the town that death is inside and must not be entered. Each bell has its own tone, its own duty. Some are soft, some are sharp. None are ever truly ignored. You once heard a story of a bell that rang from underground a church sunk in a flood, its tower still visible, its sounds still faintly traveling on certain nights when the water was still. You believe it. You want to believe it. Because a bell that persists, even beneath drowning, is a kind of comfort, a kind of promise. You close your eyes. The fire pops once. Your breath joins the rhythm of the sleepers. But still, you hear it. Not in the distance, not outside. The bell in the brain, tolling softly, marking not time, but something deeper. And if the rest of this fades into hum, you won't be alone. You are not certain when exactly the shift occurred, when dreams stopped being dismissed as nonsense and began to carry weight, to mean things, to be feared or believed, or both at once. But in this world, in this darkened room where the fire has thinned and only the breath of those sleeping nearby keeps the cold at bay, dreams are no longer private. They are not even yours. They are testimonies, warnings, sometimes even confessions extracted without consent, and whether you remember them or not, someone else will ask you to account for them by dawn. You slept, yes. You think you did. There was a river, or something like it, black and moving too slowly to be water. You remember the sound of hooves not galloping, but pacing. You heard your own name, not shouted, not whispered, but spoken aloud like a fact being stated. You turned, perhaps, or you didn't. You woke with your mouth closed too tightly and a pain behind your eyes that lingered even after you stirred the embers back to life. And when the old woman sitting by the wall asked you, "Did you dream?" you didn't answer at first. because it felt like a question meant for someone else. Or perhaps because you were afraid that answering would mean the dream had happened not only to you, but to everyone else in the room as well. That is how dreams work here. They are not the product of your mind alone. They are porous. They leak. They drift from sleeper to sleeper like smoke through rafters. One person dreams of drowning, and 3 others wake coughing. A man sees fire in his sleep, and someone across the village finds their barn in cinders the next morning. A girl dreams of a wolf circling the well, and the hens won't lay for a week. Coincidence is not a word many use. Cause is rarely demanded. The dream is enough. Your sleep habits, shaped by the cold and the weight of others' limbs pressing against you in the crowded bed, have made dreaming unpredictable. Sometimes it comes quickly, too quickly, like falling into a stream with no time to hold your breath. Other nights, it does not come at all, and you lie in a thick haze of almost sleep, the mind moving slowly in circles, as if refusing to let go of the waking world, because it does not trust what waits beyond. There are rules, unwritten, but observed with more devotion than the commandments carved into church doors. Do not speak of a dream before you eat. Do not name someone you saw in sleep, unless they've spoken first. If you dream of blood, place your hand over your mouth for 1 minute. If you dream of the dead, leave the door unlatched when you rise. If you dream of yourself from behind, do not speak at all for the rest of the day. You followed these rules before you knew what they meant. You obeyed them before you questioned them. That's how fear works. It precedes language. There was a girl, you remember, who spoke too freely. She woke laughing, said she had seen her sister dancing barefoot in the chapel, a crown of herbs around her head. The sister was not in the room. The sister had died 2 winters earlier. No one laughed with her. The laughter ended quickly. The old man by the fire stood and walked out without a word. The girl was not permitted to help with baking that day. No one told her why, and so you learn to stay silent, or to speak carefully. You say, "I dreamt of water," not "I drowned." You say, "I saw a bird," not "the bird spoke." You say nothing of the faces that were not quite human, of the doors that would not open, of the child who cried in a voice too deep for its body. If your dream troubles you, you tell the priest if you trust him. He will listen, or pretend to. He might nod. He might say, "Ah, the veil is thin." He might tell you to pray, or to burn the blanket you slept in, or to sprinkle salt over the threshold. If he is feeling bold, he will interpret. He will say, "That means good fortune," or "That is a warning." But you have learned that even he does not know. Not really. Sometimes he writes the dreams down in a ledger, not for scripture, but for safety. You suspect the pages are read by someone else, someone whose name is not spoken and whose house has no windows. Historians still debate whether dreams were truly believed or simply tolerated, whether they were seen as glimpses of the divine, or excuses for behavior too strange to justify in daylight. But those historians have never woken with the taste of ash in their mouth and found a charred scrap of cloth near the hearth they didn't remember placing there. They have never heard their mother whisper, "You spoke in your sleep again," with more fear than affection. They have never seen the entire village go silent when a child says, "I saw the man with no hands." You sit up now, blanket around your shoulders, staring into the soft red basin of the fire's remains. You think of the dream, not the image, which is already vanishing, but the feeling it left behind. A pressure in your chest, a tightness in the throat, a certainty that someone else was in your place, in your body, wearing your name while you drifted somewhere else. Perhaps that is what dreams truly are, not messages. Not warnings, but temporary replacements. You step out. Something else steps in. You return before dawn and hope no one noticed. There are plants for dreaming, herbs placed under pillows, flowers boiled into tea, mugwort, lavender, yarrow. Some swear by them, others fear them. A woman in the next village tied a bundle of rue under her son's cradle, and he began laughing in his sleep each night. By the 7th day, he would not wake. They took the herb away. He cried out, and then he stopped crying altogether. You have never used the herbs, but you have been near them. Their smell lingers long after the leaves have dried. It sticks to the thatch, clings to cloth, makes your dreams smell green and bitter. Tonight, the dreams are already near. You feel them pressing at the edges of thought, waiting for you to close your eyes, to fall backward into their embrace. You do not trust them, but you do not resist either, because here, in this time, in this world built of firelight and shared sleep and strange rhythms, dreams are not private. They are not yours. They belong to the room, to the village, to the bell that rings not only for time, but for the thin boundary between waking and something else. You lie down again, or rather, you sink. Your breath slows. You are not alone. Around you, others shift, murmur, whisper. The dreams are coming. Whether you open the door or not, they are already inside. Of course. Below is section 7, written per your exacting standards. 600 words of flowing, second-person narration. No short sentences. High emotional texture, historical nuance, and deeply atmospheric delivery, beginning with the section title for alignment. You don't always know when you've crossed the line between dreaming and waking, but tonight, you are certain not because your eyes are open, but because you can hear everything. The soft rhythm of the dog's breathing at the foot of the bed, the intermittent snapping of the fire's final splinters, the far-off owl repeating its question into the dark, and louder still, the silence from the figure beside you. They are not snoring. They are not turning. They are not speaking in their sleep the way they usually do, muttering nonsense, or fragments of prayer, or half-forgotten names. They are still too still. And in a room like this, stillness is not a luxury. It is a warning. You don't move at first. You tell yourself it is nothing, that they are merely resting deeper than usual, that perhaps the room is simply quieter tonight, and your own senses more alert, sharpened by whatever unrest kept your dreams at bay. But then you notice the way your breath echoes in your ears, unaccompanied, the way their body no longer radiates heat toward yours, as though whatever spark animated them has dwindled or drifted elsewhere. And so, cautiously, slowly, you lift yourself onto one elbow and lean just enough to listen, not for movement, but for breath. There is nothing. No inhale, no exhale, no twitch of the hand resting beside their knee. You place your own fingers near their shoulder, hesitant, not out of fear, but respect, as if to touch might wake more than just a person. Their skin is cool, not cold, not yet, but the warmth is leaving. You don't speak, you don't call their name. There's no point, not here, not when others are still sleeping, and words carry weight they weren't meant to. Instead, you sit fully upright now, blanket pooling around your waist, staring at the shape that, an hour ago, was someone, and now it still is. But less so. The room hasn't noticed. Or rather, it refuses to. The others still sleep, their breath soft, their limbs intertwined, the occasional murmur slipping through as if sleep were a conversation they hadn't yet finished. The fire flickers once more, then sinks into red, reluctant ashes. This isn't the first time. You remember another night, another winter, a cousin young, sharp-tongued, always cold had gone to sleep after the stew was shared, the laughter fading into yawns, the candles snuffed without prayer. And in the morning, she hadn't woken. No sign of struggle, no sickness before, just gone, as if the weight of another night was too much to lift, as if her spirit had found a crack in the wall and slipped through without noise. They'd wrapped her in her own blanket and carried her out before the others were fully awake. Her spot by the hearth filled quickly. No one spoke of it past sundown. You shift slightly, your back aching from the hard floor, your legs tingling from the posture you've held too long. You glance around the room. One woman is half curled against the bench, her arm dangling toward the floor, fingers twitching with some dream she will not remember. A boy lies near the fire, mouth open, twitching from cold or vision. The old man snores through his nose, rhythmic and wet. No one stirs. No one notices what you've noticed, that a space in the room is changing shape from person to object, from sleeper to memory. Sleep habits here are shaped not only by need or rhythm or poverty, they are shaped by loss. Because no matter how tightly you curl against the others, no matter how many hands touch shoulders in the dark, death comes quietly. It does not knock. It does not call out. It does not make a sound louder than your own breath. You sit beside the body, unmoving, not from fear but from reverence. It feels wrong to turn away, even when there is nothing left to guard, and so you wait. Not for them to wake you know better, but for morning to arrive. For someone else to open their eyes and understand. The old woman in the corner, the one who always wakes first, will know what to do. She's seen it before. She'll light a taper. She'll place a sprig of dried rosemary beneath the chin. She'll whisper something that sounds like Latin, though it may only be the memory of Latin. And then, without tears or shock, she'll take the blanket and fold it over the face, one edge tucked beneath the ear like a mother soothing a child into final sleep. But for now, you wait. Outside, the wind has slowed. The owl is silent. A rooster, fooled by the moon, gives one weak crow. You wonder how many others across the village are awake now, not from dreams, but from the same stillness. You wonder if this is happening in other homes, other rooms, if someone else has just placed a hand on a cold shoulder and decided to sit up rather than lie back down. Historians rarely speak of this part. They record births and marriages, feasts and battles, the price of grain and the names of kings, but they do not write about the thousands of quiet deaths that happened in rooms just like this one, deaths witnessed only by firelight and the faintest creak of wood as a body shifted into silence. There is no record of these moments, except in the way the survivors sit slightly straighter the next night, in the way they whisper more softly when sharing the blanket, in the way they keep one hand resting lightly on the shoulder nearest to theirs, just in case. You close your eyes again, not to sleep, but to hold still. Your mind drifts not into dreams, but into something slower, something quieter, a kind of suspended thinking. You remember the way they laughed 2 days ago, sharp and sudden, at a joke made by the baker's son. You remember the rough sound of their cough last night, too short to alarm, too dry to notice. You remember the way their hands moved when kneading dough, always in threes. You remember the way they once said they did not trust the wind. You open your eyes again, The fire is almost gone. The dog lifts its head, looks at you, then lies back down. Even it knows. The room still breathes. The sleepers remain, unaware. But you are already elsewhere. And if you are wondering what to do next, you already know. You rise, slowly. You take the blanket that was meant for your shoulders and fold it instead over the still chest. You smooth the fabric. You do not pray. You do not speak. You place one hand lightly where the heart used to echo, and then you sit again, back against the wall, knees tucked in, waiting for the old woman to wake, waiting for the room to notice, waiting for the bell, because it will ring. And when it does, it will not tell the village that someone has died. It will only say that another hour has passed, that sleep continues, that nothing, not even absence, will change the rhythm of this life. You sit in the dark. You are awake. Someone else isn't. And the world, as always, will go on. Not all sleep is equal, and not all sleepers belong to the same world. In this town, like so many others folded into the hills, cradled in fog and firewood, stitched together by prayer and punishment, there are those who sleep not for rest, but as ritual. Their bodies are not merely tired. They are offering. The saintly sleep differently. You've seen it. In the small stone chapel at the edge of the village, where light filters through smoke-streaked windows, and the wooden benches creak like pennants. The sisters lie on straw mats with their arms crossed stiffly over their chests, their knees bound with cord to prevent them from rolling onto their sides. Their habits coarse, dark, threadbare are still worn in sleep, because modesty is never abandoned, not even in dreams. They sleep with their faces turned toward the altar, as if awaiting instruction even in silence. It is said that true devotion continues while the body slumbers, that angels whisper only to those who surrender their dreams, that the Virgin appears more often to those who wake with stiff necks and aching joints, the marks of a holy posture well maintained. No one admits to hearing the voices aloud, but the expressions they wear at dawn, dazed, tear-streaked, trembling, say enough. And when they walk to the morning mass, barefoot over frost-cracked stone, they do not complain. Pain, like sleep, is another form of offering. You once asked a nun, long ago, what she dreamt about. She looked at you, not unkindly, and said, "I dream only when I forget to pray." That answer has stayed with you, not because it made sense, but because it didn't, because you know how intrusive dreams can be, how persistent they are, how they don't wait for permission. To dream only when you fail in devotion must mean that sleep, for her, is not rest at all, but vigilance in disguise. In the cells of the monastery, small, stinking, filled with manuscripts and mice, the monks sleep in silence. Not quiet, but silence. It is cultivated, sharpened, imposed. The walls themselves seem to enforce it. There is no talking after Compline, no singing in the dark, no rustle of straw or cough without shame. And so the monks learn to sleep slowly, carefully, as if their limbs might betray them if moved too loudly. They lie in rows, on boards or sacks, arranged like the verses of psalms, symmetrical, structured, swallowed into the cold. One of them, a scribe with crooked fingers and eyes blurred from copying too long by candlelight, once confessed in passing more to himself than to you that he feared sleep more than he feared hunger. "I wake unsure that I am still me," he muttered. It is not always easy to return, but even he does not change his posture. The rule must be followed. The sick sleep differently, too, not by discipline, but by descent. Their sleep is a falling, a drowning, a slipping beneath the skin of time. They mutter constantly, even when unconscious. They do not distinguish between waking and dreaming, between voices in the room and voices only they can hear. Their limbs jerk, their mouths dry out. Their eyes do not always close. You've sat beside one, a boy of no more than 10, skin flushed with fever, breath rattling in his chest like dry beans in a wooden bowl. His mother soaked a cloth and placed it on his brow. She whispered prayers. She cursed once softly into the straw. But the boy did not respond. His sleep was a sickness of its own, thick and tangled. When he finally opened his eyes, 2 days later, he did not speak, only stared at the ceiling as if still inside the dream. She wept then. You didn't ask why. You understood. Sometimes, you hear about people who sleep for days. They call it the long rest. It happens to the weak, the old, the cursed. A woman in the next village slept through the feast of St. Bridget, the sheep sheared and the bread baked without her stirring. When she woke, she claimed she had been with her grandmother dead 15 years, who had warned her not to drink from the left-hand stream. The villagers listened. They stopped drawing water from that side of the brook, just in case. Historians might label this superstition, an artifact of ignorance, but here, you do not correct such things. You live with too much uncertainty to waste it on ridicule. If a dream says not to step on the third stone in the courtyard, you step around it. If a sick man warns you of fire, you check the hearth twice before sleep. If a dying woman speaks in another tongue and cries when the bell rings, you silence the clapper until her breath has gone still. The sleep habits of the saintly and the sick are not separate. They are echoes of each other. Both live in liminal spaces. Both inhabit rooms where silence is sacred and breath is watched. Both wake unsure of where they've been. You begin to wonder if there's a connection, if holiness and illness are not so different after all, if both are simply names given to those who walk too closely to the edge of things, if both are merely conditions of deep surrender. You've slept near the sick, not by choice, but by need. The town is small, the beds are few. You remember the weight of their bodies, the heat of fever rolling from their skin like steam, the smell of bile caught in wool. You remember trying not to breathe too deeply, not out of fear you had already accepted the risk, but out of something harder to name. Respect, perhaps, deference, the recognition that their dreams were deeper than yours. And when you woke with your own limbs sore, your head hot, you wondered whether it had been shared the fever, the dream, the burden. Sometimes it feels like a right. You wonder, too, whether people are watching you as you sleep, if your own mutterings have been heard, your body observed, your eyes tracked behind lids. You wonder if someone in the room, tonight, is listening to your breath and asking themselves the same questions you once did. Are they dreaming? Are they close to waking? Are they still in there? Because the line between sleep and something else is never quite clear. And here, in a world ruled by bells and breath, and the weight of others pressed into the same bed, sleep is rarely just sleep. It is performance. It is prayer. It is prophecy and proof. You shift now, one arm numb, your back damp where it pressed too long against the stone wall. The air smells of sweat, of smoke, of wool unwashed. Around you, the others breathe. One snores, one murmurs, one coughs once and goes still. And somewhere in the next room, The sick woman groans again, a low sound, like a door resisting wind. You wonder if she's dreaming. You wonder what she sees. You close your eyes. Your sleep will not be saintly. You do not have the discipline, nor will it be sickly, not yet, at least, but it will be shaped by them, by their sounds, their stillness, their struggle. You will borrow their dreams, just a little, like steam drawn through the cracks between beds. And when you wake, you will not speak of what you saw, not because it isn't worth telling, but because it is not yours. You've learned, over time, that silence is never truly silent, not here, not now, not in this house with its crumbling beams and smoke-stained walls, not in this world that hums behind every breath and echoes even when no one speaks. The kind of silence you know best is the kind that lives in layers, thin as parchment, but stacked so deeply it feels like weight. It hums, it whispers, it listens back. You sit up slightly, back against the wall, as your body unfolds from the position it had curled into hours ago. There is no sound. Not exactly, but there is presence. A thick awareness in the air, not hostile, not even ominous, but awake, observant, as though the room itself had opened its eyes without needing to move. The others around you still sleep. If sleep is what this is, their breath rises and falls in rhythms too practiced to be noticed anymore. One child murmurs in his throat, caught in some dream too tangled to escape from yet. Someone shifts beneath a threadbare blanket, dragging wool against wool in a friction that sounds like murmuring ghosts. The fire has long since collapsed into glowing coals, their light like a heartbeat nearly spent, red and faint and flickering only when the wind finds a way through the boards again. And in that nearly quiet, you hear what silence holds. It is not the absence of noise. It is the presence of memory. You hear your father's voice, not as he was in life, but as he sounded in the half-light before he died low, gravel-edged, whispering your name not because he had something to say, but because names were how he held on. You hear the sound of hooves on packed dirt, even though the road beyond the cottage has been empty for days. You hear the soft clink of spoons in a wooden bowl, the laughter that followed, the sound of a brother who no longer lives here but whom you still sleep beside in dreams. You don't know if you're dreaming now. The silence makes it hard to tell. Sometimes the silence speaks back, not in words, not clearly, but in images that flicker behind your eyes when you close them. A woman in white passing through the room, barefoot and unspeaking. A tree with black leaves, growing from the hearth where no seed was ever placed. A doorway that doesn't belong to any house in the village. Yet you know what's behind it. These are not nightmares. They're invitations. Silence, after all, was never meant to comfort you. It was meant to test what you truly fear. There are stories in the village not written, not shared in daylight, but passed between hands like coins worn smooth by repetition. Stories of people who vanished during the silent hour, the time between the final bell and the rooster's first crow. They say one woman stepped outside to gather kindling and was never seen again, though her shawl remained hanging on the door. Another was heard singing through the walls for 3 nights after her death, the melody made of words no one recognized. You've never told these stories aloud. You don't need to. Everyone already knows them. They're not meant to be spoken. They're meant to be remembered and obeyed. Which is why, when the silence deepens, as it does now, you do not challenge it. You do not light another candle. You do not call out. You do not even breathe too loudly. Instead, you lean into it, like someone placing their ear against a wall to hear what's behind it. And what you hear is this, the sound of the world continuing, just a few inches beyond your grasp. Sleep habits are shaped by sounds, yes, but they are also shaped by the spaces between them. You've learned to doze not when it's quiet, but when the quiet sounds right, a lull between the crack of a log and the shifting of limbs, the pause before the bell tolls again. You've trained your body to rest in those moments because they're reliable, because they don't last long enough for fear to grow teeth. But this silence has lingered, and something in your spine recognizes that. You look across the room, or rather, into the dark where the room should be. You know its shape by heart. You could walk its dimensions with your eyes closed. You know where the table stands, rough-edged and bowed in the middle from the weight of too many pots. You know the spot on the floor where the board lifts slightly, where the draft sneaks in. You know the place by the window where the shutter doesn't quite close, where frost creeps in like a whisper each morning before the sun comes. And yet, tonight, the space feels different. Not larger, not smaller, just inhabited, as if something else has joined you. Not a person, not exactly, just a presence shaped like the thought of one. You do not speak, you do not move, you simply listen. And in doing so, you begin to hear even more. The creak of rafters settling, the stretch of cloth as someone in their sleep rolls closer to the warmth of a shared body, the soft scrape of breath escaping a dreamer's lips, and beneath all of it, something deeper, a sound like soil shifting, like the stirring of roots, a sound you do not understand, but feel you've heard before, perhaps in the belly of a cave, or the silence that comes after a scream. Historians might call this superstition, the result of too little light, too much repetition, too much time spent indoors. They might say your senses are inventing danger because they're starved for novelty. But you know the difference between imagination and instinct. This is not invention. This is recognition. There was a man, once a mason, who lived at the edge of the village. They say he went mad from silence, not from loneliness, not from grief, but from the absence of interruption. His house had thick walls. He slept alone. And over time, he began to hear a second heartbeat that wasn't his. It came only when the fire died, when the moon rose too high, when the world fell just a little too still. Eventually, he stopped sleeping entirely. They found him curled beneath his bed, wide-eyed and grinning, whispering that the silence had spoken its name. You told yourself that was just a story. You still tell yourself that. But tonight, you are listening too closely to be certain. You shift your feet beneath the blanket. Your toes brush someone else's ankle. They don't wake. The contact steadies you. It reminds you that you are still here, that the world hasn't tilted completely into the realm of the unseen. And yet, there it is again, the hum, the deep rhythm beneath everything. You close your eyes, not to shut it out, but to lean further into it, to understand it. You let your body go heavy. You let the warmth of the room return to your skin. You listen, not with ears, but with memory. And the silence that layered, living silence, begins to make space for you, not to sleep, not yet, but to stay. Because the silence is not trying to frighten you. It is simply offering something, a space, a pause, a breath held between centuries. And if this feels like a story you've only half heard before, maybe that's enough. You lie back down. The room exhales, the fire flickers once more, and the silence, at last, lets you drift. There is a rope, old and frayed, hanging in a loop above the inside of the door. You've seen it every night of your life, dangling from a beam, as if someone had once meant to tie it down, but forgot, or changed their mind halfway through the knot. It isn't used for anything else. Not anymore. Not since the last winter. Not since the stories returned. At first, you assumed it was for laundry, a place to hang the damp linens, where the smoke from the hearth might dry them by morning. But you can't remember anyone ever hanging anything there. The rope just hangs, still, limp, waiting. Sometimes it moves slightly when the wind squeezes through the wall chink near the threshold, swinging gently, like something breathing. No one ever mentions it, not directly, not even the old woman who's lived here the longest, not even the priest, when he visited last spring and stood under it as he blessed the door with salt and candle ash. But you've seen the way people avoid brushing against it. You've watched a mother lift her child's head away from it when passing through, gently, as if swatting a cobweb that wasn't really there. You've heard your uncle mutter a word, not a curse, not a prayer, when the rope shifted without touch. You sleep near the door tonight, not by choice, but by order. It was your turn. You do not protest. No one protests. Not about this. The door is the coldest place in the room. The wind creeps in, even when the latch is drawn. You wrap yourself tightly in your blanket, clutch your knees to your chest, and pretend you are no colder than anyone else. But the rope sways gently above you, and you cannot help but notice. You try not to look at it, but it hangs in your periphery, just beyond the edge of sleep, a weight suspended in the air by something older than wood or reason. There are stories quiet, cracked stories told without rhythm or pride about ropes like this one, about people who tied them not for drying, but for remembering, about villagers who tied a noose above their own doorway to keep something away, not death, but something that used to come before it. They believed that if it saw the noose already prepared, it would move on, assuming its work was already done. Others believed it was an invitation, a challenge, a dare to be spared. You don't know which story is true. Maybe none are. Maybe all. But when you lie down and feel the rope swinging ever so gently above your head, you find yourself holding your breath, not from fear, from memory, because you have seen someone use it, not in this room, not on this beam, but in the barn, years ago, when you were too young to understand fully and too old to forget. A man from the next village, a dispute over land, or dignity, or the quiet accumulation of too many burdens not spoken aloud. He was found hanging by the wrist, not the neck, a strange, slumped figure swaying from the rafter, eyes open, mouth still murmuring. They said he hadn't meant to die, that he only wanted to be seen, that it was a gesture, a message, a mistake. And yet, the rope held. Now, as you lie here beneath your own, you wonder whether it is better to sleep beneath a gesture or a warning. The sleep habits of this house change when you're nearest the door. You don't stretch out fully. You don't turn your back to the threshold. You face it always as if something might enter, and you'll need the extra moment. The others don't speak of it, but they know. You've watched the rotation, how people take turns sleeping closest, how no one argues when it's assigned, how even the bravest accept the rule. It's said that if someone wakes in the middle of the night, gasping without reason, heart pounding without dream, they've been passed by, touched, not taken. That a cold breath across the forehead is a sign not of sickness, but of attention. You felt it once, maybe more than once. a sensation like fog slipping under a door. It leaves no mark, but you remember it. And so you keep your eyes open a little longer tonight. You listen to the rope. You watch for movement. The door stays shut. The wind howls once, then fades. The rope swings once, then stills. You dream not vividly, but strangely. You are climbing a ladder, and the rungs are made of rope. Each knot is a face you know. You pass your mother, then your brother, then the face of the man who disappeared last harvest, then your own. When you wake, the rope is still swinging. You look around. No one else is stirring. The fire is nearly out. The dog beside the hearth is sleeping deeply, ears twitching. You rise, slowly, not because you are brave, but because you need to feel your feet again. You stand under the rope and look up. It is just a rope. It is just a frayed cord hanging from an old beam. But even that is not simple. Not here. You reach out and touch it. Not a grasp. Not a pull. Just your fingers brushing the coarse fiber. It is dry. Rough. Cold from the night. And yet, you let go. There are more stories once whispered only during certain moons. Ones told with eyes lowered. Of the rope above the door tightening in the night, as if bearing weight. Of sleepers found stiff-necked. Dreams twisted out of shape. Of children who spoke names they never learned, after sleeping too close to the threshold. Historians would say these are relics of rural anxiety. They would write about thresholds as psychological liminalities, doors as symbols of fear, ropes as agricultural tools mistaken for omens. And perhaps they are right. Perhaps all of it is the mind reshaping darkness into narrative. But that explanation is cold, and it doesn't help you sleep. So, instead, you obey the customs. You keep your body facing outward. You do not speak to the rope. You do not name it. You do not dream of it. And if you must wake in the night, you do so quietly, with hands in your lap and feet still on the blanket. Because the rope may not be listening, but the house is. And if the others are right, if something does pass through the village at night, counting heads, checking beds, brushing over the living with invisible fingers, then you would rather it find you still breathing, still aware, still beneath the rope, but not dangling from it. You return to your blanket. You lie back down. You pull the corner over your shoulder. The fire dies completely. And the rope does not move again. At least, not tonight. You've never seen him clearly, not enough to describe his face or name, the shape of his shadow. But you know he exists. You know it in the same way you know the cold will return after the fire dies, or that the bell will toll even when no one is left to ring it. Some presences are not confirmed by evidence. They are proven by repetition. They call him the Watcher. Not aloud, not often, usually only in muttered fragments. He passed again last night, or don't leave the gate open, or simply, he sees. No one claims to know who he is or where he comes from. Some say he's not a man at all. Others believe he's a monk who went mad and forgot the way back to his abbey. Still others whisper that he was once part of the village, and that he walks because no one remembered his name in prayer. But all agree on this: he does not sleep. He comes only after the final candle has guttered out, when even the animals lie still, when even the sick quiet their coughing for a while. He walks the edge of the town, never entering, never pausing but circling, always circling, like a dog that's not yet certain whether it means to guard or bite. You first heard of him as a child, eavesdropping through the crack in the door while the adults spoke in low voices. A neighbor's son had seen something from the hayloft, a man walking the border road barefoot in frost, head bowed, arms at his sides. not looking at the houses, only the trees. He didn't speak. He didn't carry a lantern, but the boy swore he glowed. They told him it was a dream. They always say that. But you've grown older since then. You've seen too many things passed off as dreams. A handprint in ash where no one touched. Footprints in snow that stopped mid-path. A dog howling at nothing, and then refusing to sleep indoors. You've learned that dreams are just the names we give things we can't afford to believe in during daylight. And so you watch for him now, without pretending otherwise. From the window, that scrap of horn-glazed square, you keep vigil on the nights when sleep won't come. When your body aches from stillness, and your thoughts buzz like flies in an empty jar. The watcher doesn't always appear, but sometimes, when the moon is high and the world has gone so still, it feels hollow. You catch the shape, far beyond the last hut, just at the rise where the road turns into forest. A figure, motionless for now, as if waiting for someone to notice. Then, he moves slowly, fluidly, with a pace too deliberate to be drunken and too slow to be urgent. He does not pause at crossroads. He does not mark thresholds. He simply walks, always counterclockwise, as though tracing a circle meant to hold something in or keep something out. The sleep habits of the village have shaped themselves around him. Doors are barred at sundown. The shutters are latched. Even in summer, no one lingers near the edge of town once the last bell rings. Children are told that the watcher carries a sack for sleepers who wake and wander. You never knew if that part was meant to frighten or console. Some believe he counts, that his presence is not passive, but purposeful, that he watches not out of curiosity, but to maintain order. If you go missing, they say, he will know. If you leave the town in the wrong direction, he will see. If you die with your eyes open, he will be the one to close them. You once asked your grandmother if she believed in him. She stared into the hearth for so long, you thought she hadn't heard. Then she said, he never knocks. He never needs to. And that was all. Others believe he is lonely, that he was once a man who gave up sleep in exchange for something he cannot name, and now, each night, he walks in search of it. Not peace, not forgiveness, just remembrance. And maybe, in some dark way, that's worse. To be remembered but never reached. You've never seen him enter the town, but you've felt the moments when he draws near. There's a shift not in temperature, not in sound, but in attention. As if the night itself is looking inward, as if the stars bend slightly closer to earth, as if the fire, even the coals, holds its breath. You feel it in your chest first, a tightening, then in your limbs, which suddenly refuse to move, and finally, in your thoughts, which go quiet all at once, not from sleep, but from surrender. Those are the nights you do not dream. The dog whimpers, the air thickens, and somewhere outside, beyond the line of houses, a figure passes unseen, unspeaking but undeniable, and then he's gone. It's said he walks only between midnight and cockcrow, that he vanishes the moment light touches the rooftops, that if you speak his name too many times, he will stop and turn. And if he turns, you will not wake again, not because he harms you, but because seeing him clearly unravels something in the brain. Like trying to remember a song that doesn't exist, like staring into a mirror that reflects a room that isn't yours. Some of the older men claim they have tried to follow him, that they stepped outside one night with shoes wrapped in wool and breath held tight, moving silently along the fence line, but no one who claims to have followed him can explain how they returned. Their stories trail off. Their eyes glaze. One man stopped speaking entirely after his attempt, not out of madness, but out of preservation. And still, some continue to try. You wonder what he sees, the watcher. If he looks through walls, or listens through soil, if he marks which chimneys have gone cold, which windows flicker too long, which names have not been spoken in months, you wonder if he sees you, now, lying still beneath your blanket, listening for his steps even as the room stays quiet. You wonder what he wants, but perhaps that's the wrong question. Perhaps he doesn't want anything. Perhaps he simply walks because no one else does, because everyone else has stopped, because sleep, even broken and restless, has claimed the rest of the world, and someone must remain upright, watching. You do not light a candle, you do not rise, but you do not sleep either. You lie with your eyes half closed, heart slowed, breath shallow, listening, and if names have ever outlived the ones who wore them, leave yours below, because when the watcher walks, something is always counted. You do not know what, but tonight, you hope it includes you. There are those who do not sleep where they choose not beside hearths or under rafters, not within reach of warm blankets or whispering kin, not even on the hard-packed floors of crowded rooms, but instead in corners carved out by justice, or what passes for it in a place like this, where law lives not in ink, but in the eyes of those who remember too much and forgive too little. You have passed them before the cells, the stocks, the spaces between things that should never have held a human body, yet did, and still do. You have seen the shadows of the punished slumped under stairwells, chained by the ankle to a post slick with moss, heads bowed not in prayer, but in weariness. And you have wondered, quietly, how one sleeps like that if sleep can be coaxed in the cold, if dreams still visit when the spine is twisted and the arms cannot fold inward. Tonight, as the others drift, their limbs pressed close for warmth, their breath fogging the still air, you think of those who are not allowed that comfort. Not far from here, just beyond the edge of the village square, there is a man who will sleep tonight, with a wooden collar clamped around his neck, wrists threaded through iron rings, feet bare, ankles raw. He is not a stranger. He stole bread, or lied, or spoke something too true at the wrong time. No one remembers now, only that he sleeps upright, back against a post, with no fire, no food, and no name spoken aloud. They call this penance. He calls it sleep, because it must be, because the body, when held still long enough, finds its own form of dreaming shallow, breathless, punctuated by cramps and shivers, but dreaming nonetheless. His sleep habits, if one dares call them that, consist of keeping his chin tucked just enough to prevent the collar from bruising the throat, of breathing slowly through the nose to avoid the taste of wood, of flexing his fingers not to grasp, but to remind them they still exist. You once spoke with a man who had spent 3 nights in the pillory. His arms had gone numb by the second day, and his back wept with rainwater. He said he didn't sleep, not truly, but that he remembered dreaming, not of escape, but of walking endlessly through a doorless house, searching for a bed that could never be reached. When he woke, he had bitten through his lip. You wonder what the body believes, when it is denied the softness of fabric, the dignity of posture, the right to curl inward and protect itself from the night. In the castle on the hill, a place you rarely think of, because to think of it is to invite unease, there are cells with no light at all, stone-walled, sloped downward to drain blood or water or both. The punished there do not sleep lying down, because there is no room. They do not sleep sitting, because the ceiling is too low. Instead, they lean against stone, against one another, against the weight of their own fatigue, and when they do, they slip into the kind of sleep that has no depth. The kind you wake from more tired than before. The kind where dreams are not made of images, but of pressure. And if they cry out in their sleep, no one hears. Or worse, someone does. You've never been inside, but you've heard tales. A woman who murmured a prayer in her sleep and was punished again for defiance. A boy who called for his mother in the dark and was answered by silence, not empty, but listening. A soldier who never spoke again after waking from the dream of hands that would not let go. Not all punishment looks like chains. Some look like beds taken away, like pillows replaced with brick, like rest itself being turned into guilt. There are traditions older than your village, older than the church, of punishing the body through sleep, of denying dreams to cleanse the soul, of tying one's arms to wooden beams at night, to mimic the crucified and remind oneself of sin. You heard of a monk who built a box just large enough to kneel inside and slept there for 20 years. He believed it made him holy. The others believed it made him disappear, piece by piece, until only the sound of breath remained. You wonder sometimes if that's what punishment truly is, the slow erasure of one's shape, not through pain, but through posture, through the deprivation of softness. In your own house, punishment is quieter. A child who lies must sleep by the door. A husband who drinks too much is given the cold blanket. A guest who insults the meal is sent to the barn, where the hay smells of dung, and the floor tilts just enough to spill the body toward the wall. These things are not spoken of as cruelty. They are rules, corrections, necessary adjustments in a world too fragile for disorder. You've been sent to the barn once. You remember how loud the wind became without walls to hold it back, how the rats did not fear you, how the night stretched longer than your body knew how to measure. You remember not the pain, but the shape your limbs took, half curled, spine twisted, hands tucked under your ribs like broken wings. You did not sleep that night, but you did not forget it. Some say the punished sleep deeper than their bodies, forced into stillness, surrender more quickly to dream. Others say they never sleep at all, that their minds pace like prisoners even when their flesh cannot move. You do not know which is worse, to dream while broken, or to wake without the memory of rest. You lie back now, tucked into your shared bed, your feet brushing another's legs, your shoulder pressed to the wooden post. You have not been punished. Not today, but the thought lingers, not because you fear it, but because you understand how close it always is. A wrong word, a missed task, a spilled bowl, the rope above the door, the watcher in the dark, the silence that listens too closely. Sleep habits, you realize, are not only habits, they are histories. They are the residue of choices not made, the shape of beds not offered, the echo of rules you've never questioned. You close your eyes, and in that brief moment between thought and dream, you hear it a cry, far away, sharp, short, then gone. No one else stirs. You pretend not to hear it, because even here, in warmth, beneath a roof and among those you trust, you know that sleep is still a privilege, one that can be taken, one that, for many, never arrives at all. There is a moment, and you know it when it arrives, even if no one taught you how to name it, when the place you sleep turns against you. Not loudly, not violently, but with the quiet precision of something that has decided to no longer hold your shape. It begins with a shift in weight, a slant in the floor you never noticed before, the faint crunch of something beneath the straw that was not there the night before, a pebble, or a splinter, or a kernel of truth that will not be ignored. You roll onto your side, as you always do, expecting the gentle indent of a place worn smooth by repetition, and instead find hardness, resistance, cold. The bed, if you can still call it that, no longer cradles you. It watches you. The wood creaks differently now, not in rhythm with your breath or the fire's size, but out of sync, protesting as you shift, complaining beneath your ribs, murmuring secrets you do not want to hear. You used to lie down and vanish. Now, you lie down and remember. You remember things you did not plan to revisit, the names of those who left and did not return, the words you wished you had not said, the small cruelties you convinced yourself were necessary, the kindnesses you withheld out of fear that they would make you weak. And all of them rise now, not as thoughts, but as discomforts in your spine, your shoulder, the ball of your foot, places where the bed no longer fits you. It is not that the bed has changed, but you have. Or rather, something inside you has decided to no longer pretend. You sit up, slowly. The air is heavy. Your knees ache. The straw has shifted beneath you in a pattern that feels like writing. A message, a map, a wound. You look around the room. Nothing is different. The others sleep, or try to. A child shifts in their dreams, whispering something in a voice not their own. A woman rubs her fingers together as if searching for thread. The dog near the door lifts its head, glances at you, then settles back into sleep. And yet the room feels unfamiliar, slanted, deeper than it should be, as if the ceiling has risen or the floor has sunk, stretching the space between waking and dreaming just wide enough to let something else inside. You lie back down. But now your body hesitates. It remembers the way the boards splintered under the man 2 winters ago, how the rot spread from the corner post, how the lice crept up through the straw like breath. The bed, once a refuge, has become a threshold, and thresholds demand a toll. Your sleep is different now. The habits you trusted, the curling inward, the 2 breaths before stillness, the turning toward the warmest limb, they no longer work. Your body protests. Your mind loops. You feel yourself uncoiling rather than relaxing. There is no comfort, only awareness. And with awareness comes doubt. Was this the bed you lay on yesterday? Are you sure it was this one? The knot in the wood looks different. The slat beneath your hip feels wrong. The smell, smoke, sweat. Old wool is too sharp, as if someone added something to the air. Rosemary, maybe, or blood. You close your eyes. You try to ignore it, but the bed creaks again. This time, you hear your name. Not clearly, not spoken, but shaped, formed in the stretch of wood, the rustle of hay, the moan of a frame too old to lie. It says you left someone behind. It says you lied about the door. It says you promised not to forget. You sit up again. Faster now. You stare at the bed. It does not move. But you feel it watching. Not through eyes. Through memory. Through the weight of all the nights it carried you when you pretended to be someone else. You have heard of beds like this. Old beds. Haunted not by ghosts, but by honesty. Beds that learn the shape of grief and refuse to let it go. Beds that trap dreams inside the mattress, so that every sleeper who comes after carries a bit of someone else's sorrow. There was a girl who screamed every night for a month, though she could never remember why. A man who dreamed he was a woman. A woman who woke speaking a dead language. Beds remember, even when you try not to. You lie back down again, because there is nowhere else to go. You close your eyes. You slow your breath. You reach for sleep like someone reaching through fog. And then you feel it. A presence. Not beside you. Not above you. Beneath you. The bed exhales. You freeze. You do not move. You do not open your eyes. The air has changed. The straw has grown warm in places it should be cold. You feel the pressure of something not weight, not flesh, but knowing. The bed knows you. It remembers the way you cried on the night your sister left, the way you whispered apologies to no one, the way you curled inward after the fire, the way you said you would never lie again, and you did. It remembers, and now it speaks, not in words, in pressure, in resistance, in the refusal to soften. It becomes hard where you need softness, soft where you need to hold. It shifts as if alive, but only just like breath in old wood, like a sigh from beneath the floor. You try to stay still. You tell yourself this is tiredness, not terror. You tell yourself the bed is just a bed, that the floor is just a floor, that the night cannot speak. But something inside you knows. There is a price to sleeping in places that remember, and tonight you are being asked to pay it. You do not dream. Instead, you descend, not into sleep, but into something beneath it. A hallway without walls, a room with no exits, a memory not yours, but carried by the straw, whispered by the splinters. You see your face, not in a mirror, reflected in the eyes of someone who no longer remembers who you are. You see your hands. They are stained with ink, with ash, with something darker. You wake suddenly, but you are not fully here. The bed is still beneath you, and it still does not forgive. You lie motionless, waiting for your breath to slow. And if the rest of this fades into hum, you won't be alone. Because some beds do not cradle. Some beds confess. You are not aware of speaking. You do not hear your own voice rise from the hollow of your throat, or catch the moment when your breath bends into words. But in the morning, someone tells you, not unkindly, just softly, as they press a cup of broth into your hands, or tuck the edge of your blanket tighter across your side. You talked last night, they say. And they do not smile. You pretend to laugh. You say something dismissive, vague, that it was likely nonsense, that your dreams have been restless, that the wind was loud, or the bed cold. You avoid asking what you said. You assume they would have told you if it mattered, but they don't. They only glance once more at you the way someone looks at a door that opened when it shouldn't have. You sip your broth, and you remember nothing, at least not exactly. There's a shape of a voice still lodged behind your teeth, like a word that almost formed and then got caught between breaths. There's a faint ache in your jaw, as though you'd clenched it too long. There's a tightness in your chest that you can't place, like a memory that didn't belong to you, but borrowed your mouth anyway. It happens again, not the next night, or the one after, but eventually, it returns. You wake to your own voice, echoing faintly in your ears, soft but urgent, not yelling, not whispering, but speaking with purpose, like someone halfway through an explanation that must be finished before dawn. The others shift. Someone mutters, half asleep. But no one responds. You lie still, pretending it wasn't you, that the words were imagined, that perhaps the voice belonged to the wind or a sleeper beside you. that there is no reason your tongue feels dry, or your lips feel cracked, or your breath comes as though it has just been chased. In the morning, the woman across from you avoids your gaze. You say nothing. Neither does she. It becomes a pattern. You begin to fall asleep with your mouth half open, as if expecting speech. You wake with phrases caught in the corners of your mind, not coherent, not entirely, but dense with meaning, like half-melted wax that once held the shape of something sharp. You recall syllables that do not match your tongue, the names of people you do not know, descriptions of places that feel familiar but cannot be mapped. A town with 7 gates, a woman with no shadow, a river that loops back on itself. Once, you wake whispering a prayer, not one you've ever heard. You know it's a prayer because of the rhythm, the gravity, the way the syllables fall into each other like hands clasping without needing to see. You write nothing down. You fear that giving shape to the words will allow them to remain. There are stories of people who speak in their sleep not with nonsense, but with knowledge, warnings, prophecies, truths too difficult to carry while conscious. One woman, years ago, began naming every family in the village, detailing their sins and their secrets. By the time she woke, no one would look her in the eye. She was gone by the end of the week. No one ever said whether she left or was asked to. Another man said only one word every night, the same word, again and again, in a voice not his. No one could understand it. A priest from the next town came to listen. He fell ill that same night and refused to return. You wonder what you've said, what part of you is speaking when the rest of you surrenders, and why it needs to be heard. The bed no longer feels safe. The blanket no longer feels yours. You fall asleep with the knowledge that someone or something might use your mouth while you rest. Not a possession, but a borrowing with purpose. You try staying awake, but sleep finds you anyway. You dream of doors, endless doors, each carved with symbols you recognize but cannot name. You walk through one, and your mouth begins moving. You hear the words before you understand them. They're instructions. Not for you, for someone else. When you wake, your throat is sore. Your jaw aches. You are more exhausted than when you lay down. The woman across from you is already gone. She did not wait for morning. No one mentions her name. You begin to notice patterns. When you speak, it is always after a certain silence, the same stillness that comes just before the fire collapses, the same hush that followed the rope swaying above the door, the same quiet presence that pressed beneath your bed. It is not accidental. You are not alone in these moments. Something listens, and something answers through you. One night, someone wakes you. Their hand is light on your shoulder. You open your eyes and see their face pale in the dimness, eyes wide, lips slightly parted. "You said my name," they whisper. You blink. You have no memory of this. You said it twice, like a question, then like a warning. You try to respond, but no words come. They nod once, then rise and return to their corner of the room. They do not sleep again. Neither do you. The next morning, they are gone too. You don't know if they left or were taken. The others begin to shift away from you at night, not cruelly, but gradually. The space around your bed grows wider. Your blanket is left untouched. The dog does not curl near your feet anymore. You are not shunned. You are watched. You become the place in the room that others avoid. You begin to dread sleep, but it arrives anyway, inevitable, necessary, indifferent. And every time, it brings with it that voice, yours, not yours. Once, you whisper something so sharp that someone cries out in their sleep. Once, you laugh. Once, you say nothing but weep. You wake with salt on your cheeks and no memory of sorrow. You begin to fear that you are becoming someone else, or many someone else's. Historians call this night speech. They theorize it was caused by poor air, contaminated water, mass anxiety. They write about collective dreams, about towns struck with sleep-talking epidemics, about children who would not stop whispering to walls. They blame it on bread, on mold, on fear. They do not consider that something was listening, that something still might be. You try to sleep facing the wall. You try to sleep with your mouth closed, lips sealed tight, head turned downward. But it does not stop the words. They slip out anyway through teeth, through breath, through memory. You begin to leave a basin of water near your bed. You heard it helps, that the water draws the voice into itself. That in the morning, if it ripples, you'll know the voice came. You wake to stillness. The water has frozen. One morning, someone leaves a note beside your cup. The handwriting is small. You do not recognize it. It says only, "They are listening to you, not us. Don't answer." You burn the note. You sleep anyway. And one night, you hear yourself say your own name. Twice. The first time, like a question. The second, like a warning. And you understand now that you are not the only one speaking. You are also being called. The first thing you notice when you open your eyes is that you don't remember closing them. The second thing you notice is that you don't know where you are, not truly. The room looks the same low ceiling, soot-stained beams, the soft weight of bodies breathing around you, the usual faint scent of wool, ash, and old bread. The fire is low, as expected. The dog curled at the far side of the hearth, its breath fogging slightly in the dim light. But something is wrong, not in the structure of the room, in the way the room regards you. You lie perfectly still, not from fear, but because the stillness feels required, as if any sudden movement might reveal something not yet meant to be seen. You glance around slowly. Your blanket is yours. Your position near the post is unchanged. Your limbs respond when called, though sluggishly, as if the blood had to be persuaded. But the sensation remains. You are in your place, but not quite yourself. Your breath fogs slightly in front of your mouth, but no one else's does. You tell yourself it's the angle of light, that the others are simply further from the fire, that the draft always runs this way. But you've lived in this room long enough to know its moods, and tonight, it no longer includes you. You sit up, carefully, slowly. No one stirs. You speak a name softly, a child's. The girl who sleeps near your feet. She does not move. You whisper again, a little louder. The room does not respond. The silence is total, not like the rich, layered hush you've grown used to, the kind filled with breath, creaks, night noises. This is absence, not just of sound, of recognition. You step onto the floor, barefoot, feeling for the warmth of the stone where the fire's heat still lingers. There's nothing. The stones are cold, not chilled, not cool. Cold like the inside of a well. You walk among the sleepers, and no one wakes. You kneel. You touch a shoulder. The body does not move, but it is not rigid, not dead, just unreachable. You wave your hand before a face. You shout, finally, just once. The face does not flinch. The body breathes, but it does not hear. And now, you understand. It is not that they are asleep. It is that you are not fully here. You begin to wonder what happened, what was said, what bargain was made in dream, in murmur, in the speech that passed through your lips when your eyes were closed. You begin to wonder if you offered something, if you agreed to something, if your voice, the one you no longer trust, said yes to a question you never meant to hear. You step out of the room. The door opens without a sound. The rope above it brushes your forehead, and for a moment, it feels like a hand. Outside, the village is unchanged. The moon is low. The trees are still. The fences lean in the way they always have. A single lantern flickers in the window of the house near the well, and yet it is different, because no one is awake. Not one candle in the tower, not one cough from the baker's loft, not even the faint shuffle of the watcher's footsteps along the edge of the town. Only you, only your breath. You walk the street barefoot. You do not feel the stones. You pass your reflection in the black glass of the well, and it stares back at you too quickly, as though it was already looking. You want to be seen, but nothing sees you. And that is when you remember the old saying, a saying so often laughed at, said with mock affection during cold mornings and harder evenings. Sleep like a peasant, wake like a ghost. A joke, a proverb, a piece of farm wisdom about overwork, or hunger, or the way life forgets those it has used too long. But you think now it was never meant to be metaphor. You are not dead. You are not dreaming. But you have slipped into something else, a state the old women once feared and the children were warned about, the place between a night's silence and the rooster's cry, the hour when the spirit leaves the body, not in death, but in protest, because it had been ignored too long, because you slept too deeply, because something was listening, and now you walk without weight. You enter the chapel. It is open, though no one ever leaves it so. The candles are cold, the pews are empty, the altar is stripped, the floor is swept so clean it reflects what it shouldn't. Your footsteps make no sound. You kneel, not from faith, from instinct, and when you whisper, the echo is not your own. You rise again, outside. The trees creak in wind that does not move your hair. You begin to see shapes in the corners. Not people, not creatures, but ideas, possibilities, reminders of things you almost remembered once, during the edge of a dream. And you know now that sleep, for peasants like you, has never been a luxury. It has always been a risk, because sleep takes something from you. Not just rest, not just dreams, but presence. And some nights, if it's deep enough, and the silence is heavy enough, and the watcher walks slow enough, it keeps what it takes. You return to your house. The door opens again. Your body is still there, lying quietly, face turned inward, hands relaxed. But you do not feel the pull of it. You sit beside yourself and wait for the bell, for the light, for someone to wake you. But no one stirs, and so you lie back down, not into your body, but beside it, and you close your eyes, and the bed, for once, is warm. But you are colder than you've ever been. You once believed that sleep was a gesture towards safety, that when the eyes closed and the breath slowed, it meant something had been trusted, surrendered, allowed. That sleep was the quiet proof a body gave when it no longer expected to defend itself. But that was before you understood what it meant to sleep underground, not as metaphor, not as a tale for children, but as a truth carried by those who never returned. There are stories here, always stories of those who went to sleep in the wrong place, at the wrong time, with the wrong weight in their chest, or the wrong silence pressing against their back. And when the sun rose, and the room stirred, and the coals hissed, and the rooster forgot itself, there were bodies missing, not dead, just gone, as if sleep had taken them too deep, as if the dream had found a second door, as if the bed had closed around them and never reopened. You remember one, told by your grandfather in a voice too even to be a lie of a boy who worked in the fields, cheerful, loud, always hungry, who fell asleep in the barn one evening after hauling hay, and when they went to wake him before dawn, he was not there. Only his blanket remained, folded as if it had never been used. No footprints, no sign of struggle, just one shallow hollow in the straw, the size of a curled child, and beneath that, nothing but earth, packed smooth and undisturbed. They searched, of course. The village combed the woods. They lifted floorboards, drained wells, opened root cellars long sealed. They blamed wolves, witches, wandering men. But none of those fit the shape of a boy who folded his own blanket. Eventually, someone whispered, he must have slept too close to the grave. You did not understand then, but now you do. Because tonight, the floor beneath your bed is soft, not loose, not muddy, but soft in the way that soil turns when something beneath it has shifted, not risen, not fallen, just moved, adjusted, accommodated. You lie still. You do not call out. You think of the rope above the door, of the watcher at the edge of the town, of the voice you spoke with while your own mouth lay slack in sleep. You think of the night you woke without breath, only to find your body breathing without you. You think of the straw that whispered your name even as it burned. And now the floor. You rise, slowly, carefully. You press your foot against the stone near the hearth. It holds. Then the wood plank near the bed. It does not. It shifts. Just slightly. A sigh. Almost. A yielding. You kneel. You touch it. It is warm. You peel it back. Beneath it, not a hole. Not yet. But the beginnings of space. Darkness shaped like invitation. And the smell, not rot, not mold, but memory, as if the ground had remembered someone, as if the floor were trying to return something that had never been claimed. You replace the board. You sit on the edge of the bed. You wait. No one else stirs, not even the fire, and you wonder, have others felt this? Have they, too, pressed their palms against the wood and felt the heart of the house beat once in answer? Have they dreamt of coffins shaped like their own bodies? Have they woken with dirt beneath their nails and forgotten how it got there? You think of the graveyard at the far end of the road, the one with too many names carved into too few stones. You think of the unmarked plots, the shallow mounds, the places where moss grows faster than memory. You wonder how many of those who lie there were ever truly buried, and how many simply never woke. You lie back down. You do not sleep. You descend, not through dream, through weight. The bed grows heavier. The air presses down. Your limbs slacken. You feel the floor beneath you breathe. And in that breath a word, not spoken, understood. Stay. You dream of soil, of roots tangled through your hair, of stone shaped like ribs, of worms that hum lullabies in languages you recognize only because they are older than speech. You do not fight it, because the sleep is deeper than anything you've ever known. Not peaceful, not soft, but complete. You wake to darkness. You cannot move. You cannot lift your head. You feel pressure on your chest. You feel grain beneath your palms. You open your mouth, and earth fills it. You are not suffocating. You are not dying. You are being kept. Because the ground is not cruel. It is simply patient. It keeps what others forget. You close your eyes again, and the earth listens. There are legends of monks who buried themselves alive to escape temptation, to simulate resurrection, to test the silence of God. There are rumors of women who climbed into crypts during plagues and never emerged. Their names never added to the ledgers because no one remembered to write them down. There are stories of beds that sink into the floor if a sleeper lies too still for too long. You always thought they were stories. Now, you understand they are instructions. You lie in the dark, neither afraid nor calm. You feel the weight of centuries pressing against your skin, not heavy, but familiar. You are not alone. Others are here, not people, not voices, traces. You feel a hand near yours. It does not reach. It waits. You do not know how long you remain. There is no light, no sound, no time. Eventually the pressure lifts. The grain softens. The breath returns. You sit up gasping, blinking, covered in sweat. But the bed is dry. The boards are solid. The others sleep. And the fire crackles, as if nothing had happened at all. You touch your chest. There is dirt beneath your nails. You do not speak. In the morning, no one comments. But the old woman watches you too long. She stirs her tea counterclockwise. She adds salt instead of honey. You eat. You dress. You nod. And as you step outside, you feel the floor beneath you shift just slightly, as if remembering your weight. You will sleep again tonight, because you must. But now, you will listen more closely, because not all sleepers are carried upward. Some are pulled down, and the ground, once it recognizes you, does not always let go. It wasn't yours to begin with. It arrived folded at the foot of your bed one evening, pale blue or perhaps gray. It's difficult to tell in the candlelight, soft from many washings, threaded at the sleeves with stitches that are neither neat nor careless, just practiced. You touched it, tentatively, and your fingers recognized something that your voice could not name, not familiarity, but expectation, as if it had been waiting for you. No one said anything when you lifted it. No one explained where it came from. No one claimed to have placed it there. But no one looked surprised either. And so you wore it. Because here, when something appears beside your bed, a blanket, a bowl of water, a line of salt, a stone with your birthmark carved into it, you do not question. You receive. The nightgown fit too well, not like something tailored, but like something shaped over time by bodies it had already memorized. The hem brushed just above your ankles. The sleeves hung slightly long. The neckline was high, as if sewn with modesty, long before modesty was demanded. The cloth smelled faintly of smoke, of soap, of something metallic and old, like rain on iron. You slept in it, and dreamed of nothing. Not peace, not darkness, not even absence. Just a long hallway made of breath and silence and footsteps that never turned around. You woke with the nightgown twisted at the waist, damp at the collarbone. You thought nothing of it, until the next night, when it was folded again, neatly, waiting. And so you wore it once more. The others began to look at you differently, not with suspicion, but with resignation, as if your trajectory had become fixed, as if the wearing of this garment meant something you had not yet agreed to, but would soon find yourself obeying. You began to notice the gown on others, too, not often, but sometimes, worn by those who later left without goodbyes, worn by those who became quiet, worn by those who no longer stirred when the bells rang, but rose before them. It was never the same gown, exactly, but it was always cut the same way. No ties, no buttons, no embroidery, no color bright enough to be remembered. Always that pale, undeterminable shade, the color of moonlight remembered through fog, and never a name stitched inside. You asked once carefully where the gowns came from. The old woman with the torn lip shook her head. "They don't come," she said. "They remain." You asked what she meant. "They wait," she whispered, "until the body that wore them is forgotten. Then they return." You did not ask again. Each morning, the gown is folded again, always placed precisely at the same angle, as if done by invisible hands, as if your sleep resets it, as if the bed itself performs the ritual. You stopped wearing your old shirt after the third night. It didn't feel right beneath the gown. It didn't fit the quiet. It belonged to a life you no longer slept in. You tried returning the gown once. You placed it beside the door, folded in a way you hoped would seem respectful. But when you returned that evening, it was back on your blanket, perfectly arranged. You understood, then, that it was not a question. The gown would be worn because it had chosen you. Your sleep changed. Not worse, not restless, just thinner, as if the fabric between you and the night had grown transparent, as if your dreams now belonged to someone else. You began to dream in third person. You saw yourself walking, not where you were, but where someone had once waited. A field with 7 stones, a cottage with no door, a river that turned away when you tried to drink. You began to forget small things, the name of your cousin's baby, the flavor of the broth you made 2 nights ago, the last conversation you had before the bell rang. You began to speak less, not because you had nothing to say, but because silence suited you. The others did not speak to you unless spoken to, and you didn't mind, because something about the nightgown comforted you, not its softness, not its warmth, but its clarity, its absoluteness, its stillness. You slept like someone who had ceased to worry, not because the world had changed, but because your place in it had. There are stories of garments passed from sleeper to sleeper, not heirlooms, not gifts, but tools, anchors, threads connecting the body to the world beyond the body. One tale tells of a man who wore a borrowed robe and began to speak in tongues. Another of a girl whose dreams were haunted until she buried the shift she'd worn every night since her mother died. Another of a tailor who refused to stitch nightclothes for the monastery because every time he tried, his hands shook and the cloth unraveled. You wonder how many sleepers your gown has known, and how many of them still speak through it. You try not to think of the stains. There are faint ones, barely visible unless the firelight hits just right. On the sleeve, near the hem, a shape like ash, a shape like blood, a shape like salt dried into cloth. They do not smell, but they remain. You dream of them, not the stains the moments before they happened, the gestures, the hands, the silence. You wake with your hands clenched. You do not remember why. You fold the gown as always. One morning, it is not on your bed. It is gone. You say nothing, but the absence is loud. You wear your old shirt again, but it doesn't fit. not in the arms, not in the way it feels against your skin, not in the way it makes others glance at you, confused, uncertain. You are not yourself in it anymore. You ask quietly where the gown went. The old woman shrugs. It's gone back, she says, to where you ask, to wait. You never see it again. But one day, years later, you wake early and see a girl in the far bed, a stranger, new to the house, thin, quiet, unnoticed, folding a pale blue gown in her lap. You say nothing, because you understand. She will sleep differently now, and soon, so will the rest of us. He crows once, and that is expected. It is the sound that pulls the town upright, the echo that brushes dust from lids still closed, the declaration that daylight, or what passes for it, has returned again, without anyone's permission but with everyone's compliance. His cry is neither triumphant nor melodic, not celebratory but procedural. It rings out like a checklist ticked, like an hourglass flipped, like a sigh that must be uttered aloud before the breath is returned to someone else. You've heard it every morning since before memory began to calcify into name. But it's the second cry that unsettles you, because no one teaches you about the second cry. No one writes it down. No one even admits to hearing it. The first is for the living. The second is for those who didn't stay. It comes later, not much, just a moment, but long enough that you've risen, turned, maybe whispered something to the cold wall beside your bed or reached for the cup left half full the night before. Long enough that you believe you've survived the threshold between sleep and day. And then he does it again. Not louder, not softer, just again. And it doesn't feel like the same rooster. It doesn't sound like the same world. You sit very still when it happens, because you are not supposed to notice. The second cry is not yours. It's not for those who got up. It's not for those who listened. It's for those who drifted somewhere deeper in the night and forgot which direction was upward. It is a sound that names them without speaking, counts them without numbers, tallies them with feathers and frost. And every time you hear it, you wonder who isn't here that was who failed to make the return journey from dreaming. And why does no one else look shaken? The second cry has no place in sermons. It is never carved into bells. It does not belong to God or town or even to morning. It belongs to whatever hovers just before forgetting, whatever pulls softly at the ankle when the body tries to rise. You begin, after a time, to notice patterns. The rooster cries twice, most often, when the night has been still, not stormy, not loud, but suspended. Those hours where the wind forgets itself, where the fire gives no crackle, where even the dogs in the alley behind the tannery sleep nose to tail in mute spirals. It happens more frequently in winter, though no one keeps track. The chill seems to invite it. Cold presses down like a lid. Sleep in those hours becomes heavier, becomes something poured, something steeped. It happened. You remember, the morning after your neighbor's eldest didn't wake. The child had coughed for days, nothing loud, nothing fearful, just a soft bark, like a dog trying not to disturb the house. And then one morning, silence. No breath, no protest, no ritual, just the second crow. And the rooster stood on the roof beam of the bakery, looking nowhere. You said nothing, of course, because what is there to say? Because if you ask, they'll say it was your imagination. Because if you ask, they might think you've started listening too closely. And once you do, it's hard to unhear. You begin to wake before the first crow. You lie there, pretending not to anticipate it. You pretend it's still possible that there will only be one. But there is always another now. Some mornings it comes early, interrupting footsteps, silencing spoons, freezing conversations half-formed. Other mornings it waits until you're convinced you've outrun it, until you've wrapped your shawl and stepped into the path of others, only to hear it thread itself through the thatched roofs like a question not meant for ears. There's a boy who says nothing anymore, not because he can't, but because he swears the rooster speaks in that second cry. He told you once before, he folded in on himself like a letter, never opened, that the sound carried names, not aloud, not in syllables, but in shapes that pressed against the ribs. He said he heard his brother's name in it, then his father's, then his own. Now he doesn't speak, only listens. There is a belief whispered only by candle stubs and crumbling teeth that the second cry is older than the rooster, older than the dawn, older even than the act of sleep itself. That once, when the first people learned to close their eyes, there was something that remained awake, something that needed to know when each body returned or didn't, and so it placed the sound into the chest of the bird. A ledger that sings, a feathered priest, a toll. Sometimes you imagine what it would be like to follow that second sound, not away from the house, but deeper into it, into the crevices, into the dark beam behind the stair, into the notch where the mortar flakes near the hearth. You imagine walking until the sound stops, not because you've left it behind, but because you've entered the place where it no longer needs to echo. The room of the already gone, the corridor of sleep that did not turn into waking. You never do, of course, because you are not brave, because you are not ready, because something in you, something old, something shaped like a child's bedtime breath, still fears not the sound, but the silence that comes after it. And still, you listen. And still, the rooster crows, once for the living, once for the missing, once for the tally no one wants to keep. It was not a myth, not an exaggeration told by aging mouths around sputtering fires, not some quaint idea imagined by outsiders who didn't know better. No, the town really did sleep together, you included. You always have, though you rarely think of it that way, not until the silence grows heavy enough to touch, and you realize that the breathing around you is not only your own. One hall, one room, one long, groaning body made of boards and straw and elbow-shaped interruptions. Dozens of people arranged like folded linens, like tools in a chest, like coins in a buried pouch, all shaped differently, but pressed close, touching, some with backs against walls, others curled in corners. And in the center, the long shared pallet, not one bed, but a field of sleep, stitched together from rag and hay and habit. You lie in it. You have always lain in it. Since your knees were small enough to fit beneath someone's cloak and your ears knew the sound of snoring before they knew your own name. It does not feel strange to you, not anymore, because this is how the town remembers itself, through warmth, through proximity, through the unspoken code of breath shared in darkness. There is no privacy here, but there is something else, something that almost tastes like safety, though you wouldn't dare name it aloud. Safety, after all, is not something you say in a place where wolves are still a rumor and fever still walks on two legs. In the day, you forget what it means to be this close to others. The world opens up again. It gives you tasks, distance, roles. It stretches time between bells, builds fences of hours and expectations. You speak to people, and they speak back. You have names, faces, anger. You pretend you are singular. But at night you return to the truth. And the truth is this: you are one of many, lying beside many, dreaming inside the same skin of darkness. There is a rhythm to it, a breathing that sinks. Even when no one speaks, the sounds line up: the shuffle, the roll, the sigh, the cough, the creak of wood beneath hips. It becomes a kind of lullaby, a tired orchestra, always slightly out of tune, but always complete. And when someone is missing, when a cough doesn't come, when a rustle never arrives, it is felt more than noticed, like a tooth no longer there, like a habit forgotten mid-motion. They say, and by they, you mean the oldest sleepers, the ones who forget nothing, that the hall remembers its sleepers, that if you lie in the same place long enough, the boards give slightly for you, the cold bends itself around your shape, that if you left tomorrow, your echo would still warm the space for days. This is why no one rearranges at night. This is why, even in illness, in bleeding, in birth or death, people do not move rooms. They shift slightly. They carve space as if drawing a line in flour. But they do not abandon the rhythm. Because if you break it, if you fracture the breathing, the silence might spill in. And the silence, once inside, is hard to push back out. Once, a man tried to sleep apart. You remember it because it was winter, and the nights were sharp enough to cut cloth. He'd argued that he needed solitude, that his prayers were too loud, that his thoughts were too crowded when wrapped in others' breath. So he laid down in the loft of the granary, far from the noise and warmth. By morning, he spoke with a slur. By nightfall, he stopped speaking altogether. Some said it was the cold. Others said he heard too clearly the thoughts he had once drowned in company. Whatever the truth, he never slept again in silence. He returned to the hall without being asked, without being welcomed. And the breathing accepted him, slowly. You wonder, sometimes, what it would feel like to sleep in a room alone, to stretch your arms without touching cloth that isn't yours, to shift without someone muttering half a dream in reply, to wake to your own breath, unbraided. And then, on those nights, when a sickness sweeps through, when someone's child is coughing through the dark, or a birth turns bloody behind a curtain of linen, when the whole hall seems to hold its breath and lean toward the event like a body drawn toward pain on those nights, you know why you never left. Because sleeping apart is one kind of danger, but sleeping together is the only kind of mercy you have. There are rules, of course, unspoken, but carved deep. You do not speak unless spoken to after the second bell. You do not roll more than once without apology. You do not whisper secrets when others might still be drifting. You do not cry louder than you must. You do not confess in full voice, even in dreams. You do not ask about the stories muttered by the midwife. You do not trace the names carved into the wooden beam at your feet, not even if you know one of them used to be yours. You do not lie awake long enough to become a watcher, because watchers are worse than ghosts. Watchers carry knowledge that shouldn't survive daylight. They see too much of how people curl, what people fear in their sleep, what shapes sorrow takes when it no longer needs a mask. You remember becoming one just once in the year the fever came. Your brother's breath had stopped. Quietly, without announcement, the kind of stopping that took minutes to notice because everything else had continued. And when you looked down, you saw his eyes still open, still shining like someone waiting for a reply. You didn't scream. You didn't even gasp. You lay there and became a watcher until the third bell, until someone else stirred, until the room began to shuffle and remember itself. He was carried out before sunrise. The boards never warmed again in that spot. Some say the hall forgets the dead quickly, but you've seen the way a mother still turns slightly, the way her hand still reaches toward a shape that isn't there, the way a younger sibling still leaves space, unconsciously, as if not to disturb a ghost. You know the hall does not forget. It remembers in posture, in gaps, in the way no one will sleep beside the left window anymore. There are benefits, too, to sleeping in this press of limbs and linen. You learn the weight of others. You learn their rhythms, their mutterings, the way one person can shiver without waking, and another can laugh mid-dream. You learn the songs they hum to themselves, the verses they whisper to gods that aren't yours. You learn what matters and what doesn't. You learn how to fall asleep in the middle of a lullaby meant for someone else. You learn how to mourn by listening to how the breathing changes. And sometimes, when the night is particularly long, when no dreams come and the dark stretches like a sea with no shore, you reach out not for anyone specific, not for any voice in particular, but just to know you are not alone. And always, someone's fingers find yours, not to hold, not to speak, but to remember. This is how the town sleeps, together. Not in joy, not even in choice, but in survival. And in that survival, something sacred flickers. Not a flame, but maybe the echo of one. It is some time after the 5th bell, though no one marks the bells now, not with ears clogged by dream or silence or the absence of both. The fire has long since sunk into its own breath. The coals are no longer red, but something older, like the memory of warmth, in a room that never truly needed fire to begin with. This is not a morning that arrives. This is a night that lingers out of forgetfulness. And so you lie still, not because you are resting, but because motion would break something fragile, something you cannot name but instinctively fear to disturb. You're not alone. But the closeness of others no longer comforts the way it did in earlier hours. Their limbs are still here. Yes, still curled like commas along the ragged syntax of the shared floor. But their presence feels like punctuation that's already served its function. The story they were part of is over. And yet, the sentence never ended. The air is too thick, too reluctant. As if the room has collectively held its breath and then never quite remembered how to exhale. You sit up slowly, so as not to wake the shape beside you. You think it is Merelda, or her sister, or maybe just the bundle of cloaks left behind by both. The familiarity is fading faster than it should. The faces in this room, always half-lit and fully known, now blur at the edges like ink left too long in the rain. You blink, once, twice, no difference. The night refuses clarity. The world has chosen this haze. You walk. Your feet remember where not to step the floorboard near old Henrik's back, the cold draft by the doorframe, the notch where the herbalist lays her bottles. You don't need light. You've done this before. You've risen in the early stretches of almost morning, when time splits like old wood, and wandered the house not out of urgency, but out of that peculiar restlessness that sometimes follows too much stillness. But this time feels different. Not just because the shadows seem longer than usual, or because the silence is too full of listening. No, it's the feeling that the house itself is watching, not as a protector or a witness, but as something waiting, patiently, quietly. Without blinking, you step outside. There is no dawn, not yet, not even the usual soft betrayal of gray at the edges of the sky. No rustle of chickens, no dogs scratching in sleep. The world is paused, and it has forgotten how to start again. You feel as though you are stepping into a painting hung on the wrong wall of time, and in this painting, the brushstrokes have only rendered the night. You are barefoot. You don't remember choosing that. The dirt beneath you is cool, not cold, but soft in the way freshly dug earth is soft, as though something beneath has been turned over. Not threatening, but unsettling all the same. You glance back at the house, expecting someone else to follow, or at least for the door to look more familiar than it does in this suspended half-light. But it doesn't. The hinges look older. The wood seems slightly less real, more like the idea of a door than an actual one. You blink again. Still no dawn, not even birdsong, not even the usual sigh of a branch leaning. And for the first time, you wonder, has the night decided not to end? It is not an idea you're meant to entertain. You know this. In all the lore, all the tales told to keep children from wandering too far after dusk. The threat was always in the darkness itself, not in its persistence. The wolf came from the dark. The spirit whispered from it. The sins hid within it. But the night itself, the night was always just a container, a temporary silence, soon undone. But what if the container cracked? What if morning simply forgot to arrive? You keep walking. Through the village that now looks like it was drawn by memory instead of experience. The blacksmith's shop is still there, but the chimney is wrong. The baker's window no longer has the warped pane. The well has a rope, but no bucket. Everything is almost correct, but only almost. You feel you could knock on every door and no one would answer. Not because they are asleep, but because they no longer recognize what answering is. There is a sound, faint, like a bell muffled by distance, but not a town bell. No rhythm, no purpose. Just a metallic exhale that repeats only when you stop noticing it. You turn your head, trying to trace it, but your ears disagree. The sound is not in the world. It's in the frame of it. You pass the chapel. Its door is open, as it never should be at this hour. A candle burns on the altar, but the flame leans sideways, as though undecided whether to rise or bow. You step inside, not out of reverence, but because the candle is real or seems to be. It flickers, and you remember how fire usually behaves. You remember the mornings you watched light slip through the window beside this very pew. You remember prayers, mumbled, half remembered. You remember that time should pass, but it doesn't. The candle continues. The night refuses. And now something older wakes up in your chest, not fear, not confusion, but a hollow sort of awe. As if you have become the last awake thought inside a dream, the world itself is trying to forget. You sit, you do not pray, but you do listen. And what you hear is the same sound that has always been there, the wind pressed too tightly against stone, the wood shifting in its sleep, the murmur of old breath still trapped in the beams. These are the sounds of the village remembering itself, but they are also the sounds of something preparing to forget. You walk home slowly, if that's what home still is. The door accepts you. The room has not changed, not much. Someone turns in their sleep. Someone else mutters a name you once answered to, and you lie down again, as though nothing happened, because maybe nothing did. Maybe the night is just longer this time. Maybe the world did wake, but you didn't. Maybe this is what sleep has always been, a stretching of time, so long and slow, that it sometimes brushes against the edges of eternity. You close your eyes. There is no pressure to wake, no demand for morning, only the breathing, still rhythmic, still together, still echoing the truth that tomorrow is just a habit, and the night this long Heavy, beautiful, broken night is the only thing that ever promised to return. You've wandered far enough through this half-told thing. Nothing here asked to be remembered, and yet, here you are. If your thoughts are already elsewhere, let them keep going. If you're still listening, odd, but not unwelcome, leave a dot. If this drift kept you company, sleep however you must. History won't notice, but I might.